Hello, Jacksonites! I know it's been a minute since my last video. I don't think there's going to be any more horror-related content, at least not centered around Halloween. I just had a really busy and hectic second half of October, but ranking the 7 deadly slashers was a pretty ambitious video, so hopefully that was enough to tide people over. It did feel like a fitting conclusion to the spooky Halloween season. But today is November 3rd, 2023.
Happy
It
Godzilla Day.
it is the 69th giggity anniversary of the Big G. Godzilla himself is now 69 years old.
69. I just gotta play that clip for Billy Madison.
Giggity.
Or Bill and Ted. 69 dudes.
So to celebrate this occasion, I will be doing a month-long celebration of what I'm calling Kaiju-vember, loosely. I have
Super Kaiju Binge title, right?
Yes. Hopefully I'm able to do all 5 of the videos that I have planned for this month. But starting strong, not doing a Godzilla movie. I'm saving that for a special occasion.
On Godzilla Day, mind you, I'm like, all right, Nick, it's Godzilla Day. What Godzilla movie are we going to talk about? He's like, we're not doing Godzilla.
Nope. Not yet.
Not yet. But you know what?
But
we're doing something that restarted the Kaiju, the new golden era of Kaiju movies. So
we are going to be reviewing the film that broke the ice and broke the drought.
Oh my goodness.
After what really felt like 10 years, but was really more like 7 or 8. Today, me and Seanie Boy will be reviewing the Guillermo Del Toro classic on its 10-year anniversary. Not to the day, but this was released 10 years ago.
God, 10 years.
2013's Pacific Rim. Yes, indeed. Okay, Sean, I know you have a lot to say about this, so jump
Oh
right
my
in.
goodness. Pacific Rim. As soon as I heard this movie was announced, immediately became my most anticipated movie of 2013. I didn't see a trailer, I didn't see any footage. As soon as I heard giant monsters versus giant robots, and then you get the director of Hellboy involved with it, I was instantly sold. And then the first trailer dropped, I was like, yes, this is what I've been waiting for so goddamn long. I hadn't really had the chance to ever see a giant monster movie outside of Cloverfield on the big screen before. So my enthusiasm and excitement for this movie is tailor-made for me because we went through such a large, long-ass drought where we weren't getting any sort of giant monster movies or creature features or anything for so long. I mean, we had Cloverfield in 2008, and then if you want to count another monster movie, King Kong 05, and maybe Clash of the Titans, the remake of that. But other than that, pretty much next to nothing in terms of monster movies. Godzilla took a hiatus for 10 years. I think there was Gamera the Brave in 2006, but you get my point. We had next to nothing, nada, zip. And then here comes this movie, this fantastic, wonderful film directed by the man, the myth, the legend himself, Guillermo Del Toro, the guy who starts 100 projects but almost never finishes most of them. Pacific Rim, giant robots versus giant monsters. And I was so excited for this thing. When the movie came out, I actually was out of state, and I'm on family vacation or whatever, visiting in North Carolina or whatever, and I'm just I have to see this movie. I have to see this movie. I have to see it. I don't care if I'm on vacation. Drop me off at the fucking theater. I need to see this movie now. It was it was the past 2 or 3 years, my most anticipated movies always came at the time when I went on a family vacation or something. The year prior was Dark Knight Rises, and then the 2013 was Pacific Rim. So finally got around to seeing this movie, and I thought it was awesome. Yes.
See, that's why you get your own place. That way your family can't.
This was 2013, Nick.
I was okay, fair enough.
This is a decade ago. So I was a much younger individual. I couldn't even legally drink at the time. So yeah, I mean, you can look and see my channel. I reviewed this movie when it came out, way back when. But like I said, I was so excited for this movie. And then when I got home, like, you know, when I had my own vehicle and then I went to the theater, I think 3 or 4 more times I saw this. So my one friend and I saw it like twice in theaters because he saw it when I was gone. He's like, oh my God, this movie is incredible. And then we went back again. Like, he's like, as soon as I heard that first, like the first theme music by, I don't know how to pronounce the guy's name, Ramonda. He did the music for Iron Man. And I think he also did Game of Thrones. But as soon as
we'll get to that a little later.
Right, as soon as that like theme music starts to kick in, and I'm like, okay, this movie's gonna be fucking great. And it was. I mean, the first shot of the movie, you think you're in space, but no, it's really the bottom of the ocean and just giant monsters and the Golden Gate Bridge getting destroyed for the 8 millionth time. That poor bridge, it just suffers so much in movies. Actually, like, it's statistically, like, you're statistically more than likely to see that bridge get destroyed than like be saved in a movie at this point. I feel like whenever that bridge shows up in a movie, stay the fuck away from it. I mean, it gets destroyed in this, like Godzilla 2014, the next year, Planet of the Apes,
X-Men
the
3, I
core.
think.
It's been X-Men 3. That goddamn bridge has been destroyed more times than it hasn't in movies. You have a movie, you show the Golden Gate Bridge, stay away from it. I'm getting away from this damn bridge. But you know what I mean. Like I said, that poor bridge.
Terminator Genesis,
the core, San Andreas, Rise of the Planet of the Apes. Rise of the Planet of the Apes, it gets wrecked, basically. I mean, like, not fully, but like there's disaster on the bridge. Yeah, like I said, this bridge, it sucks to be that bridge. But yeah, so this movie came out. I saw it like 4 or 5 times in theaters. I was really disappointed with the world at the time because this movie opened to like number 3 at the box office behind, like, what was it, like Grown Ups 2? And I'm like, fuck all of you. You went to see that piece of shit movie instead of seeing Pacific Rim. I was so angry at the world because I'm like, this is a movie tailor-made for me. But again, Godzilla 2014 hadn't come out yet, which really, like I said, this is the intro to it because a lot of people hadn't really seen giant monster movies and wasn't any like huge stars or anything like that in it. I think if you had like a big name,
Idris Elba.
Well, he wasn't. I didn't even know who the guy was at the time. Like, it's easier to say that now. This is 2013. Like, we have to flash back a little bit. Like, like Charlie Hunnam was like in Sons of Anarchy, and Ron Perlman was Hellboy. But like Pacific Rim was like a completely like original IP at the time. So like, I mean, I think if they had maybe like if Tom Cruise was in the lead of this movie, it would have done well. Like, I mean, it did well financially. Like, overseas is what saved this movie, and of course, over the years, it's developed more of a positive following. And it led to the greenlighting of a sequel, which the less said about the sequel, the better. Right now, we're thinking positive. We're thinking positive. We're thinking Pacific Rim. But man, look at that cover. And I mean, this is one of those, like, it's like a classic movie, like a Jurassic Park or something. Like that's the vein I put like a Pacific Rim, a good old fashioned fun summer blockbuster. That if this thing came out like when I was a kid, it'd be like one of my favorite movies of all time. And you know what? I saw it like when I was a bit older, and it actually is still one of my favorite movies. It's one of, like, honestly, I don't know. You could make the argument it is the best film in the kaiju like golden renaissance in some ways. I mean, it's
up there.
It's up there for sure. Like I said, you could make the argument it is because there's a lot that this movie has going for it. And it is most excellent, but like for the time being, when we had nothing like this
was a huge breath of fresh air.
It was a breath of fresh air. We hadn't had, like I said, we haven't had a giant monster movie in so many years. And it was great. I mean, I love the first Pacific Rim movie. Iconic, fantastic. It was just what we needed at the time. And then this kickstarted the new golden age of monster movies. So, like I say, this 2014, you had Godzilla. I think 2015, like, in Jurassic World came out. Like, I mean, I'm counting like monster movies, like creature features and all that. Not necessarily kaijus, but, you know, Jurassic World came out in 2015. 2016, you have Shin Godzilla. 2017, Kong Skull Island. 2018 movies like The Meg and Rampage. 2019, King of the Monsters.
Pacific Rim 2
and Pacific Rim 2. Yes, I forgot to mention that one. But yeah, like I said, this movie kickstarted a new era.
And the anime Godzilla movies.
That's for Netflix, Nick. I'm talking theaters, and I'm talking. So, but
yeah, okay,
you get it.
So Pacific Rim, despite how much. Okay, before we get to Pacific Rim, let's talk about Guillermo Del Toro for just a minute, because okay, so technically, I have reviewed these movies before. Back in, I think, 2018 or maybe early 2019. But I remember absolutely nothing that I said about these movies in that video. So, and I don't remember speaking about Guillermo Del Toro. So, Guillermo Del Toro While yes, he does have a little bit of J.J. Abrams syndrome in that he starts a million and one projects and only finishes one. At least when Guillermo does finish his projects, Guillermo del Toro is a fabulous filmmaker.
Oh, absolutely. I was really
I
excited for
have
his movie after this, but then like it was Crimson Peak, which I only watched once. I thought it was gonna be like a strip. It was like a love, like a gothic ghost story, love story or whatever.
I've only seen a few of his films. Like I've seen Hellboy 1 and 2. I love the first Hellboy movie.
I like this.
Second one,
I love the second one more. The scene that
yeah.
sells it for me is where they're singing "Can't Smile Without You" and they're getting drunk. That's my favorite scene of the movie. I just love that moment between Abe Sapien and why did they make Hellboy 3? I'm sick of these. Why did we get the 2019 reboot instead of that third movie?
See, I actually like the 2019 one more than both
You're one of the
combined.
few people who did. So I saw that. I'm like, I don't think it would have been like that bad to have it out there if you would have finished the story, right? Like at least an
Sure,
animated.
but
I would have been fine with an animated conclusion if it got to that. I just wanted to see the conclusion of Del Toro's vision in that front. But
um I did not like Crimson Peak at all. It was
Blade
not the
2,
movie that I was expecting.
yeah, I was kind of disappointed. I only watched that movie like once. Maybe I'll watch it again one day, but I like Blade 2. Blade 2 is pretty sweet.
I fucking adore Blade 2.
Blade 1 and 2 are awesome.
Yes. Um
I we want to tell you a little confession. I have not seen Pan's Labyrinth.
I have. You're not missing anything. It's Misery like the movie. Great special effects though.
Hmm.
Um, and I have seen The Shape of Water. That is also a
I saw
great
that in
film.
theaters. I really like that movie. Michael Shannon, so over the top. Michael Shannon to me is like Nick Cage in a movie. He just goes so when he goes like over the top angry, he's just hilarious. He literally rips
Yeah.
his own fingers off when he's angry. And then although that movie, whoop,
Okay, so Guillermo's output may be kind of hit or miss, but when Guillermo is firing on all cylinders, he's one hell of a filmmaker. So
absolutely.
even for movies that I'm not a big fan of, there still are elements to it that are very praiseworthy. Like with Pan's Labyrinth, it's Misery the movie, but the effects and the fantasy setting are absolutely phenomenal. Um, and Guillermo del Toro is one of those filmmakers that not only does he make movies, he loves movies.
He have you seen his house? Like the dude has like a mansion. It's nothing but movie memorabilia.
No, but I'm sure it's a
Oh no,
sight.
no, he has like the ultimate dream house. Like literally, he buys all sorts of old movie props and stuff like that. And his whole house is like
Like Peter Jackson.
right, pretty much like him and Peter Jackson like compete for stuff. I guess to just
Um,
own. It's a cool looking house. All the stuff he has because he just loves movies and you can feel his passion in every single frame of this movie. And that's
yes.
one of the things I just love about it.
So when it comes to Pacific Rim, I had absolutely no idea that this movie was to exist. I did not see a single trailer. I did not see a single ad, not even a single poster. I saw nothing.
That's awesome because you go in like not knowing and it's like the best surprise.
I had a friend. This is going to sound really strange. It was the early 20 teens, so social media was weird. I had a friend that I had online. I cannot remember his name for the life of me. Literally cannot remember his name.
Honestly, a lot of the people I like met online and talked to, like I can't remember their names or like the conversations we had.
But he and I had the only thing that I remember is he was Chinese. That's literally the only thing I remember. Weird confession from the early 2010s aside. But he and I had a common interest in kaiju films. So after months of talking about Godzilla and Ultraman, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, he said, "So have you seen the trailer for Pacific Rim?" And I was like, "What's that? Pacific Rim?" He said, "Yeah, it's this new monster movie coming out, directed by Guillermo del Toro." And he sent me a link to check out the trailer. So I did. I watched it on YouTube like maybe 2 months before the film came out. And I was like, Oh, this looks interesting. And at this point, I had completely given up hope that we were going to be seeing any more monster movies because we were in the thickest of the thick, dark times of the
Yeah, we're
kaiju.
we're spoiled today, Nick. I mean, look at how okay, like I know today's Godzilla Day, but do you see all the Godzilla stuff within a span of like a year? I mean, look at this. We have Monarch Legacy of Monsters premiering this month, and we have Godzilla minus one also like getting premiering today in Japan, and then later on this month in the States. I mean, I know they say December 1st, but there'll be screenings of that here. And then Godzilla, I guess it's now called Godzilla Kong, the New Empire, the X is silent. Next year. I mean, we are spoiled as kaiju monster movie fans nowadays. Like there's so much out there now. I mean, the Dark Ages was a really tough time for
Yeah.
fans because we got nothing. I mean, kids nowadays are so
Well,
spoiled.
technically speaking, stateside, it really was a drought because this was the first monster movie stateside since Cloverfield. And that movie doesn't give us very much kaiju stuff in and of itself, as we discussed in our
Mm-hmm.
Cloverfield video.
Still good, but
So, discounting that, this was the first monster movie since King Kong '05.
well,
And
Clash of the
man,
Titans.
was it a rough wait.
Clash of the Titans, I'd argue, because that's 2010, and that has some
I
monster
I
creature
don't.
features.
I know that the Kraken is a giant monster, but it's only in it for not even 30 seconds.
Right, but you're still getting monster type like creature features stuff in there. That's why I'm still going to count that one because there are a lot of monsters that Perseus and that fights in that movie. You know, I got to rewatch that. I haven't seen that movie since theaters.
Neither have I. I
I
didn't
didn't
even
like
see it in theaters. But anyway, so
Wrath of the
in,
Titans suck though.
I didn't even know Wrath of the Titans was a thing until 2 years after it was out. But anyway, so going back to, so I said this in my Gamera the Brave video. After Gamera the Brave, the entire world kind of saw the kaiju genre hitting its rock bottom because stateside there was nothing for 8 years, not counting Cloverfield. But then um, in Japan, Ultraman ended after, well, not really ended, but it took a massive hit after Ultraman Mebius. Kamen Rider entered its toyetic Batman Forever Bandai stage that it's been in ever since.
Mm-hmm.
Super Sentai started really going off the rails in terms of its ridiculousness, which I think is the reason why Power Rangers is disassociating itself with Super Sentai. And the Godzilla franchise had taken a hiatus in 2004. And then all throughout the late 2000s and early 2010s, we would see a lot of these kaiju parody short films like Gihara, the long dark haired monster, which is only like a half-hour long short film. There was Demiking, the sea monster, which is another big monster movie parody. There was the 2010 Death Kappa movie, which was also a big giant kaiju parody. But just overall, in the late 2010s to throughout the late 2000s and early 2010s, truly the kaiju genre hit its rock bottom, and it was a miserable time.
Misery, misery, misery. That's what you've chosen.
The thing is, we didn't choose it. At least I didn't.
I wanted it, but I was like at when Godzilla, like when I finished watching Godzilla Final Wars and I got the DVD of it, or whatnot. I just remember like being really sad because it was like billed as like the last Godzilla movie, and I like how he goes off into the sunset. But then like when it was over, I'm like,
There's no more.
no
What am
more.
I going to do with my life?
Exactly. But that was 2004. I was a much younger child at that point. But
True, yeah, but still,
that's 20 years
um,
ago almost.
that fucking goddamn drought, it was rough times. There would be I'm not even joking. There would be times I would be sitting at my computer and I would just cry because there was zilch, nothing kaiju related coming out. So when Pacific Rim came out, I did not see it in theaters.
Oh, that sucks.
Yeah, I really, really would have loved to see this movie in
Hmm.
theaters,
Maybe
but
they'll do a Fathom event at some. Well, Del Toro, I think, did a limited release Fathom event or something. Not this
cool.
past.
I didn't know about it.
Well, like I said, I think it'd be cool to have like a little wide release or something. Maybe just we can call it the Nick special screening. Like you don't have to pay for anything. You just have to show up and you get to watch it on the big screen.
2012 and 2013 were kind of really rough years for myself for a number of reasons. But they were also, aside from 2022, I did not see a single movie in theaters all throughout 2012 and 2013. I did not see a movie from Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2 until Godzilla 2014. So this really was in the thick of just like a very, very bad dark period for myself at the time. So I just bided my time and waited for this movie to come out on DVD. And this is that same DVD that I've had ever since. I was very excited to check this movie out when I first got it. I went home and all I had to watch it on was a 13-inch portable TV with an integrated VHS player. And I just plugged my DVD player into the coaxial ports. Yes, this was 10 years ago. And I watched Pacific Rim on my PS2 on a little 12-inch screen. And let me tell you what, I ate pretty damn good with this movie.
You know what you are? You're like Will Smith at the end of Pursuit of Happiness, or after all the shit you've been through, and then like this little moment in my life. This is called happiness, where you finally get something you've been waiting for so long, and like after like it's one of those like very rewarding movie experiences where it's like you've been given crap so much, and then when you finally have something that like has some sort of meaning to it and is really like fantastic, it just makes you feel like all sorts of good vibes. You know what I mean?
Yep. So, yeah, I really like Pacific Rim. It really threw me for a loop and it really rocked my world. It was a very nice icebreaker after having such a long drought. And as I said back in our 2014 review, there immediately I just kind of felt something's coming. I do really think that something's coming. And lo and behold, look what happened next year with Godzilla 2014.
Mm-hmm. And
So Seanie Boy is right. This movie really was the film that kickstarted this new giant kaiju renaissance that we're
let's be
still.
honest. At the end of the day, it's Legendary Pictures who did it. It was Thomas Toll, who's this big fanboy of like Japanese giant monsters. He's the one who got Pacific Rim off the ground. He's the one who brought Godzilla and Kong together to create the MonsterVerse. It was him. Legend. He was the CEO of Legendary. He's just a big geek, and like the right person was in charge at the right time, and that's now why we have this golden age of monster movies we're in right now.
And I should really buy that man a drink.
And he also
And
produced Jurassic
thankfully,
World, didn't he?
I have no idea.
Legendary
Thankfully,
did.
too, I see zero signs of this kaiju renaissance slowing down anytime soon. So Sean's right. We really are spoiled as kaiju fans nowadays.
And you know what? The kaiju renaissance is like they're technically kind of having the last because superhero fatigue. You're hearing a lot about this end of the stuff, but you know what's staying strong? The monsters, the Godzilla stuff right now. You know why? Because they're taking their time. They're not oversaturating the market with it. They're like giving a little bit of breather room. Because, like I said, like 2-3 years between movies, I'm okay with that. Yeah, we'll have a little bit of a gap here and there, but I'd rather wait for something better than just like have constant stuff rushed out that's not good. You know what I mean?
And also, as an Ultraman fan, just as a very quick side note, it's now a very happy time because now the entire franchise, all the way up to Ultraman Rube, has now been released stateside. And I couldn't be happier.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, this movie really was. I akin Pacific Rim kind of to maybe not the original X-Men movie, but more like Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man movie. This is really what like launched the this like broke the ice and launched this new kaiju renaissance and like showed people, hey, we actually do like monster movies. We went without them for so long, and it turns out, no, we did miss this. We had our heads buried in the sand for a while, thinking this is what we wanted, but now that we have this back, no, I don't think we need to give this up again. This is nice.
Very
And
nice.
and here's to it continuing for another at least 10 years. So, with all that being said, Pacific Rim is a 2013 American science fiction monster film directed by Guillermo Del Toro, starring Charlie Hunnam of Sons of Anarchy fame, Idris Elba, Rinko Kikuchi, and Ron Perlman, also of Sons of Anarchy fame, but more so other Guillermo Del Toro films fame,
Charlie Day
notably
as well. Always Sunny. Just had to throw that in there because Charlie Day deserves some credit too.
Hellboy, and is the first film in the Pacific Rim franchise. The screenplay was written by Travis Beacham and Del Toro from a story by Beacham. The film is set in the future when Earth is at war with the Kaiju.
I was going to say one thing, Nick. I did once converse with the writer of this movie on Twitter before.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I asked him like which kaiju was his favorite. I think he said Slater was. I think that's the big one at the very end.
Colossal sea monsters which have emerged from an interdimensional portal on the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. To combat the monsters, humanity unites to create the Jaegers, gigantic humanoid mechas, each controlled by two co-pilots, whose minds are joined by a mental link. Focusing on the war's later days, the film follows Raleigh Beckett, a washed-up Jaeger pilot.
No, Nick, you didn't say it right. You got to say like the one guy, Raleigh.
I'd rather not because that dude's a dick.
Yes.
A washed-up Jaeger pilot called out of retirement and teamed with rookie pilot Mako Mori as part of a last-ditch effort to defeat the Kaiju. The film was released July 12, 2013, receiving generally positive reviews. The visual effects, action sequences, and nostalgic style were highly praised. While unfortunately it was an underperformer at the box office in the United States, it was highly successful in other markets, thus becoming a box office success. It earned a worldwide total of more than $411 million, earning $114 million in China alone, its largest market, becoming Del Toro's most commercially successful film. The film is regarded as an homage to kaiju, mecha, and anime media. Oh, yes, indeed it is. Making all that money against a $180 to $200 million budget. Damn, that's a lot of money. So the plot begins in 2013. Massive alien monsters called Kaiju begin emerging from an interdimensional portal called the Breach at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean and start attacking coastal cities. In response, humanity builds massive robots called Jaegers, German for hunter, each co-piloted by two or more people who share a mental link by a process called drifting to share the mental stress of piloting the machine. Sean, do you want to pair off and read off the plot together?
Yeah, sure. It's on Wikipedia, right? Where am I at?
Yeah, I'll read the second paragraph, then you can take the next one.
Okay, sounds good.
In 2020, brothers Yancey and Raleigh Beckett pilot the American Jaeger Gypsy Danger to defend Anchorage from a Category 3 kaiju named Knifehead, who severely damages Gypsy, killing Yancey in the process. That's such a weird name, Yancey.
Yeah, the names are very bizarre, but like I feel like they're just like kind of having fun with the names.
Raleigh kills Knifehead and pilots.
Like Idris Elba's name is Stacker. Who names their kid Stacker?
Who knows? Raleigh kills Knifehead and pilots Gypsy solo to shore before collapsing. Traumatized by the loss of his brother and the stress of piloting alone, Raleigh quits the Jaeger program.
5 years later, world leaders decide to cease funding for the Jaeger program and replace it with the coastal defense wall, since kaiju attack frequency is increasing and Jaegers are being destroyed quicker than they are built. really dumb idea. How's this wall
Yeah.
going to stop? It immediately gets like thwarted, like, oh, took an hour. Wow, that was a big waste of time. Although the walls are quickly proven to be ineffective, the remaining Jaegers are relocated to Hong Kong under the command of Marshal Stuck of Pentecost, who plans to try to destroy the breach using a tactical nuclear weapon despite unsuccessful previous attempts.
Raleigh, now working in wall construction, is recruited by Pentecost for the mission. At the Hong Kong base, the Shatterdome, Raleigh is introduced to Mako Mori. I gotta say, real quick, that actress, straight up, is Japanese Mary Elizabeth Winstead.
Yeah, she kind of resembles. I didn't think about it so now, but like, yeah, you're pretty much right.
The
Sucks what happened
director.
with her in the sequel.
More on that later.
I'm sorry, I just have to keep shitting on the second movie.
The director of the Jaeger Restoration Program and, it is later revealed, Pentecost's adoptive daughter. 4 Jaegers remain operational: the refurbished Gypsy Danger, the Russian piece of shit Cherno Alpha, the Chinese waste of space Crimson Typhoon, and the Australian Striker Eureka, piloted by father and son team Herc and Chuck Hansen. To find a new co-pilot, Raleigh participates in tryouts, deciding that Mako is drift compatible. During their first test, Raleigh falls out of alignment after reliving Yancey's death, causing Mako to become lost in the memory of a kaiju attack on Tokyo, nearly firing Gypsy's energy cannon. As a result, Pentecost grounds Mako.
Pentecost consults kaiju experts Newton Geisler and Herman Gottlieb. Herman claims that the breach will stabilize and the kaiju will increase in number, but it will allow the assault to succeed. Against Pentecost's recommendation, Newton drifts with a kaiju brain to learn more about them, discovering that kaiju are bioweapons grown by aliens so they can colonize Earth. Pentecost instructs Newton to find black market dealer Hannibal Chow to obtain another kaiju brain to drift with. Newton realizes the kaiju have hive mind gained access to his brain. Since drifting is a two-way link and the two newest kaiju emerge, Leatherback and Otachi are sent simultaneously to find him in Hong Kong.
All Jaegers except Gypsy Danger are dispatched to intervene. The kaijus destroy Crimson Typhoon and Cherno Alpha very easily, while Leatherback disables Striker Eureka with an EMP blast, also injuring Herc. As the only non-digital Jaeger, the nuclear-powered Gypsy Danger is sent by Pentecost to help. Gypsy manages to defeat Leatherback and Otachi. Newton and Hannibal go to harvest Otachi's secondary brain, but discovers she is pregnant. The infant kaiju bursts out and devours Hannibal before choking on its own umbilical cord. Newton and Herman, the two bumbling buttfucks, drift with the infant's brain, discovering that the breach only opens in the presence of a kaiju's DNA.
Pentecost reveals to Raleigh he is dying of radiation poisoning due to piloting a first-generation Jaeger alone to save a young Mako, and has been unable to pilot a Jaeger since then. When the two new kaiju are detected guarding the breach, Gypsy and the repaired Striker, piloted by Pentecost and Chuck, begin their assaults. I still don't understand how the drift compatibility works between them. They're just like, okay, we're fine. We'll get into that later. Approaching the breach, the Jaegers are attacked by the kaiju alongside new Category 5 kaiju, Slater, lending to Striker being crippled. Pentecost and Chuck sacrifice themselves and Striker while Gypsy slaughters Slater. Riding its corpse into the breach, Raleigh ejects Mako from Gypsy, manually triggers Gypsy's nuclear core reactor self-destruct, and ejects himself before it explodes and seals the breach. Raleigh and Mako's escape pod surface in the Pacific Ocean. They embrace as rescue helicopters arrive. They embrace, but they don't kiss, which I'm like,
Thank you.
Thank you. That was, to me, the biggest surprise of the movie. I'm like, oh my God, they actually didn't do that. Like, to me, I'm like, okay, you expect it's going to go one way, but then it's like, no, they just embrace. Even though I still feel like there's kind of more there on the surface, but they didn't force it at the end of the movie. It felt like a loving, like, I care about you embrace, but without like smoochy. You know what I mean? So I was very surprised by that. And I think had Charlie Hunnam come back for the next movie, you know what? That kind of sucks because he's kind of disappears in the next film, and then Mako, like, I would have liked to have seen him show up.
Let's save that for the next
I'm
movie.
sorry. But yeah, so Pacific Rim, I guess you want to say talk about the plot.
Well, before we begin, a word from our sponsor. He actually has something for once.
It's some
Maybe.
high quality H2O. Someone in the
I
chair
like
pouring metal.
you like me back.
And she showed me your boobies, and I like them too.
Oh, that's funny. Alrighty, so I'm just gonna jump right into it. Pro number one is the plot / premise itself. Do you want to talk about the plot?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, your pro number one. I mean, I guess we'll talk about the plot. I don't have that as a pro, but
I
like,
love it.
I mean, like I said, I think this is a perfect movie. Like, just like it works pretty much well as a standalone movie. Yeah, there's some interesting mythos they could explore more with future stuff, but it really does work like as a one and done in a way. It doesn't have any sequel baiting or anything like that. It's a simple, easy story to follow.
It
They
shot
somehow
all of its bullets.
right, like they got pretty much everything you need in like one movie right here. And while I wanted more, I in hindsight I would have been okay with this just being one thing. But anyways, so the plot of it, like I said, is very interesting. How like the concept works. They did a good job balancing the human storyline with the monster storyline. Like and this interesting, unique concept. It is an original IP. It's loving tribute to like Japanese cinema, like robots and like or let's like robot animes and kaiju movies. I mean, look at I mean, that's one of my pros is like Del Toro's passion, but we'll get into that in a second.
Mine
Um,
too, so we'll talk about that too.
right. But like I said, the plot's very simple. I'm surprisingly made the drift concept work very well and like easy to follow. There's some nitpicky elements to it, like drift compatibility. How does it really work per se? Because it seems like sometimes like, oh, we're not drift compatible, but like, oh, but we are. And then I'm like, okay, I kind of would have liked a little bit more diving into that. But like I said, the way that people Neuralink with Jaegers to kind of control them felt very much like a Power Rangers thing, except with like the remote controls like a specific way. But like kind of the concept of two pilots having to be in unison, I kind of like that concept because given how powerful and big and large the Jaegers are, so there's some good stuff in that involves. An interesting human element to it, like just it's just people like sent to desperation having to bond together to ultimately save the world, and you get some incredible action, like some really good action scenes in the movie. The Hong Kong fight scene, mwah, chef's kiss. But like I said, I like the story. You have a pilot who went through a traumatic experience and trying to find a bit of redemption within himself. You have Stacker Pentecost and his storyline. You have Mako and her need to kind of prove herself. And then you have kind of the side story stuff, like with Ron Perlman, like taking the like his stuff where he makes money off the kaiju products. Like I kind of like that interesting angle. And you have the two bumbling butt fucks, as you called them, doing their stuff. They're actually really good comedy like side characters in this movie. I think they work quite well. I mean, Charlie Day is a very funny actor. I mean, I don't know if you ever watched It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. He's very funny.
Nope.
Oh, he's very funny. Although Dennis is my favorite character on that show. But Charlie is really great on it. So as soon as I saw him, I start laughing because like he just has a natural like ability to be funny, and like the chemistry those two had is pretty great. Idris Elba, like I mean, I can't say enough good things about him. This is the movie that introduced me to the guy, and like immediately
Mine too. Yeah.
I'm like this guy like rocks. Like he's really good. There's like a sense of humor to him. But you know, go ahead and talk because like I said, then I'm just going over my pros basically.
Yep.
So
Okay, so the premise and plot, I love it. It feels very original. It feels very fresh and new, but it does feel wonderfully familiar. So, not talking about the passion real quick, it's very easy to segue into that. But sticking with the plot, um, it does feel kind of similar to the plot of Attack on Titan in kind of the broad strokes. It's humanity being attacked by a race of giant creatures, and at some point they do hide within a bunch of walls to protect themselves. And in order to fight them, they decide to create monsters of their own.
yep. And you know what's funny,
It's
Nick?
kind
You
of
mentioned
similar.
Attack on Titan. Attack on Titan actually ends tomorrow.
Cool. I don't care. I've never seen a single
Oh,
episode outside
well,
season one.
okay. Well, I'm just saying, like that show gets fucking crazy. I'm excited to watch the finale tomorrow. It's like an hour-long special or something.
And funny enough, this same year in 2013, the first season of Attack on Titan dropped. So maybe Guillermo Del Toro was taking a little bit of influence from that, but who knows?
Yeah, because I mean, this was in production for a while, and Legendary, I think actually, or Legendary Warner Brothers actually has the rights to make a live action Attack on Titan movie, and it was supposed to be like from Andy Muschietti, but I think he's just gonna do comic book movies for a bit. But I don't know. The guy who made the 2 It films.
I know. Yeah, I know who that is.
Okay.
Anyway, so yeah, I love it. Again, it's very original. It feels fresh. It's a huge welcome, relieving breath of fresh air for kaiju fans. Um, it manages to pay respect and homage to its past and the influences that it's taking inspiration from, but it still manages to carve its own way and create its own mythos and its own name for itself. This is something that can stand by itself, like the Pacific Rim franchise with the Godzilla franchise and Gamera and Kong. Like this could be added to the Mount Rushmore of kaiju media.
Yeah.
Although ironically the face of this franchise is a giant robot, but still I love it. This movie's plot is pretty fucking kick-ass.
Yeah.
Guillermo knew what he was doing, and he was firing up on all cylinders, and this movie kicks ass.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Speaking of which, pro number 2 is the passion in this movie. Like Guillermo del Toro's passion and like all his references and nods and homages, like he just poured
Oh, every
all of
single
his
frame is just so much love and dedication.
yes to
From
the
Del
kaiju
Toro.
genre. Guillermo was just throwing everything he had into this movie.
He was the perfect guy to make this movie. And it
Yeah.
feels different from his other films too, which is what I like about it. Because you look like Del Toro. I mean, Hellboy has its own distinct look and vision to it. This, like, it's the same director, but it feels different. You know what I
Well,
mean?
different enough to not be comparable to any of his other movies, but if you are familiar with Guillermo del Toro's filmmaking style, there are attributes to this that just scream Guillermo del Toro. Like two
Ron Perlman.
examples. Okay, 3. Ron Perlman. 2. Guillermo loves water. A lot of Guillermo's movies tend to be very wet and rainy. Not to be nasty, shut up, get that smoke off your face. But also 3, more often than not in a lot of his movies, there's always an autopsy on the gnarliest monster possible. Like with Hellboy, there's an autopsy on Carl Ruprecht Cronin. In Blade 2, there's an autopsy on one of the Reapers. And in this movie, Newton is dissecting bits and pieces of kaiju left and right for the first half of the movie.
There's always some sort of creature in his movies, I feel like.
Yeah, that too.
You know,
Except maybe Crimson Peak.
no,
But
there's ghosts. Like, if you count those as like supernatural creatures of sorts.
okay, sure. But I
But
mean,
like, there's
like,
always some sort of monster in his, like, some type of monster in his movies.
so yeah, you can obviously tell that Guillermo del Toro knows his shit. You can tell that he's a kaiju fan, and you can tell that he's just in general a fan of Japanese media. I've always liked to compare this movie, or maybe not compare, but call this movie essentially Godzilla meets Mazinger Z. And it's
Godzilla
all
meets Gundam.
no, not Gundam. The Jaegers
Gundam
are
Wing.
much more akin to super robots, not real robots.
Well, Gundam Wing is like the fighting style. Like, they have the pilot in there moving their arms and all that to fight.
Maybe sure with that aspect, but the look of the Jaegers, they're much more akin to like Mazinger Z or Getter Robo rather than Gundam or anything like
The
that.
second movie kind of leans more into that Gundam angle, I'd say.
Damn, you just keep bringing up the damn second movie.
I'm sorry, Nick. I haven't let it go.
But not much to say about the passion. But yeah, you can tell Guillermo del Toro's a fan, and
Okay.
it shows.
Yeah, but anyways, you know what? Passion was like listed as like 9 in terms of my pros, but you know, I'll just like highlight it and check it off. I mean, pretty much everything you just said right there. I mean, Del Toro's Passion is very, very. apparent in every single
Evident.
frame of this movie. I mean, I like going back to watching interviews as he was making this thing. He was talking about all his favorite kaiju films. And then like he was talking about his love of Godzilla, his love of War of the Gargantuas, and kind of the humanity of the monsters. Like he understands like he just understands the genre, right? And he's like fusing two like amazing things together. Clearly, like I think he mentioned that this was the most fun he ever had making a movie because it's just like he's just a kid like who gets to play with all like these cool toys and have a lot of money thrown at it. And his passion and like his understanding of the sense of scale of these monsters and like the robots and everything, like every frame is detailed with so much love, and it's just a beautiful looking film. And I just love, I mean, that's one thing I love about Del Toro is his passion, like you mentioned earlier on, his passion for movies, his love of it all, things like creatures and monsters. Like this is like a cool dude to kind of hang out with. I'd feel like we just talk
Mhm.
movies and just watch monster movies all day. Like I said, I mean, I really always admired like Del Toro. I mean, he's made a lot of great movies like this one, the Hellboy stuff, Shape of Water, Blade 2. I mean, we mentioned, like I said, his passion shines through every frame of this movie.
I have a
Um,
lot of faith in his upcoming Frankenstein film.
oh, I heard he was doing Frankenstein. I'm like, please be good. Is it through Universal or is it like kind of its own
I
thing?
think it's a Netflix movie.
Mm-hmm. Oh, somebody
But
said Guillermo
I don't
definitely pulled influence through Gundam as well. He said that Cherno Alpha, for example, was based on Zaku from Gundam. Okay. Thank you, Shuichi354.
know. Oh, okay. Well, I didn't know that. It, the Jaegers always came off more Mazinger Z to me.
Gotcha.
But that's beside the point. Pro number 3 for me is the characters. Great cast is assembled here. A lot of Idris Elba is definitely more of a big star nowadays, but I would say that this movie's full of a lot of strong B-list actors. Like
Yeah.
Charlie Hunnam had just done Sons of Anarchy,
Mhm.
which is a great show, but Charlie's never really done anything super big outside of Sons. Again, Ron Perlman, he's a much stronger B-list actor, a little bigger nowadays, especially with doing Transformers 7, but he had also just done Sons of Anarchy.
And Hellboy.
Yeah, this I believe was his 4th film that he collaborated with Guillermo Del Toro because he did Kronos and the first two Hell. Oh no, Blade 2 as well.
Blade
So
2.
6.
So he's done a lot of movies. He's like Del Toro's go-to guy. Like much like how Bruce Campbell is Sam Raimi's go-to guy, Ron Perlman is Del Toro's go-to guy.
Yeah. Um
And Doug Jones. Doug Jones is like his other go-to guy too.
well, sadly there's no Doug Jones in this movie.
Right.
Would have been nice though if he could have done motion capture for one of the kaiju. That would be cool.
Right. Who knows? Maybe he did something like that. But yeah, go ahead. No. Oh, your mouth's full. I guess I'll take over while you're chewing your food. But anyways, I was gonna say supporting cast, main cast. You know, I'll just say the cast in general. I mean, Raleigh and Mako. This is also one of my other pros is like we kind of mentioned is like everything's kind of kept platonic between them. So especially the ending, I really admired that the film did that and didn't kind of go through with the romantic angle between the two of them. Maybe it could have been something explored in another film or something if they ever had the chance to, but unfortunately, we know where that led. As he mentions that movie. But the cast in general is really strong. Like there's a lot of actors that really stand out here. My favorite is still like Idris Elba. I think he is the best character in the whole film. I mean, when he gives this whole speech, it's like it's the best like doomsday speech since like Bill Pullman in Independence Day, where he's like, "Today we celebrate Independence Day," and so he's like, "Today we are canceling the apocalypse." I mean, I didn't know who this guy was back in 2013, but immediately
Me
after seeing
neither.
this movie, like I became a big fan of him. Like whenever he pops up and things, like, "Oh, it's that guy, Idris Elba." So he was great. The supporting cast, like I said, I think Mako and Raleigh are like pretty decent leads. Like they're perfectly serviceable. Like they're not like mind blowing amazing, or they're not necessarily my favorite characters, but I still do like them, and I think they play well off each other. There's an amount of respect and admiration they have for each other, and it's not necessarily something like you said, very romantic. It's still like very caring. I mean, there's hints that there's more to it than that, but they don't really dive into that because that's not really what the movie was about. It's kind of a sense of unity. Charlie Day, of course, very funny. The way he plays off of like Herman's character, and like they're kind of bumbling back and forth between them. Like I also like the part where after they drift with the kaiju brain, he just throws up in the toilet that just happens to be in the middle of the city. Like that's funny stuff. And of course, the man, the myth, the legend, like Ron Perlman. He's pretty great whenever he's in things, and like Hannibal Chow is just a pretty memorable, like over the top, wacky type character, and like his sense of fashion and all that. And then just complaining about his goddamn shoe. Like I said, there's all sorts of things.
Goddamn shoe.
Right, and even then, like you have kind of like the side character, like the actors who have just kind of little parts who make the most of it, like Clifton Collins Jr. He's just like a friend, but like you kind of buy like the dynamics and the relationships with them because like Del Toro didn't really go for any A-list, like you said, it's more like B-list actors, but they're like really good actors, and I think they filled their roles like quite well, and like I really admire that about the film. Like nobody, there's like you don't really feel like anyone's ego on screen, like sometimes you do with some movies where it's just like I'll say like Vin Diesel, like in a lot of his like Triple X, you'll see his ego clearly on screen there, or like Steven Seagal, with
Especially with him.
yeah, especially with Steven Seagal, you'll see it quite often. But yeah, you don't really get that here. Like I said, everyone's doing their part, everyone's working together. Like they feel more like real people. I mean, like more over the top people. Like they don't feel like actors playing a part. They feel like those characters, is what I'm trying to say. So I like the cast. I think it's great. I think everyone's pretty good. They're likable human characters within this film. And sometimes with monster movies, it's hard to get like you'll have like either really good action with the monsters, then you have kind of forgettable human characters. Sometimes you have a pretty good human story, and then sometimes the monster stuff's kind of like, yeah. I think this one's a good job at kind of balancing both. Are they some of the most iconic characters you've seen in a creature feature film? No, they're not like they're not like a Jeff Goldblum level in like the first Jurassic Park. I'll say that. But there are some really good ones. Like I said, Idris Elba, I think, is terrific in this one. And I think he's the best in the movie personally. And like his connection with Mako, like that, like adoptive father angle. Like I said, all that stuff like really kind of worked for me. And even the young actress who played like the young version of Mako, I thought she was quite good for her limited like screen time that she had. I really felt like this kid has just gone through some serious shit, and the limited screen time she kind of had with those flashback stuff. But
impactful.
yeah, most impactful. Like it's really good stuff. So like I said, the cast is really strong in this thing. I think all the actors did their job pretty well. So yeah.
So talking about something that Sean mentioned, one thing I appreciate on this most recent viewing is that if this year has made me realize something, I really appreciate monster movies or just like movies in general, where there's a great cast camaraderie. Like the characters in the film, there's not really any tension. The only problems that I have an issue regarding Idris Elba, so I'll talk about that a little later. But the only character who really has a massive ego that kind of clashes with everybody is Chuck Hansen.
Oh yeah, he's like the diva in the movie.
Yeah. Though thankfully it is very satisfying to watch Raleigh kick the shit out of him just because he's being a little prick. But for the most part, it's like something that Raleigh says in the opening narration. We pooled all our resources and set aside past conflicts, and we just work together to solve a massive problem. It definitely does feel very reminiscent of Godzilla King of the Monsters. There's everybody here is working as hard as they can, as much as they can, in order to defeat these fucking monsters.
Or I'll give another Godzilla example since it is Godzilla Day. Ghidorah, the three-headed monster, and it's not from the human perspective; it's the monster perspective. Because Ghidorah is this big threat. You have Godzilla and Rodan who are constantly fighting, don't give a crap about people, but Mothra kind of like shows them their ways, and they ultimately have to kind of team up to stop Ghidorah. So like there's still that sense of like coming together to save the world, and I always kind of like that too. I also kind of like sometimes when rivals team up as well. Like people don't initially like each other, but if you build it, it's got to be built up enough to like really like make you feel that impact sometimes. Like there's just kind of that cheerful moment where like people kind of come together after all the shit they've been through. It's a rewarding experience. So, and I feel like you kind of get that here. But like I said, I mean, the Chuck Henson, he's probably like the most annoying character in the movie because he just feels like unnecessarily like douchey. Like I mean, it just felt like a little bit of a top, like it's like they kind of needed that Top Gun competitive nature vibe with it when you didn't really need it in the movie. Like I guess they had to kind of fuel tension, but even then, like there's scenes that are fine. Like when Stacker is just like, 1, don't ever touch me again. 2, don't ever touch me again. Like where the stuff with Mako and that, and her like inability to kind of like her issues with the drifting. Like that was enough tension as is within the human stuff. You didn't need Chuck Henson there, and like he he felt like an annoying high school bully in
Yeah.
this thing, and he's kind of like, like it just didn't feel it felt kind of forced. Like that's the one
But
aspect.
thankfully, there are still moments in the film that like try to ring Chuck in. Aside from Riley kicking the shit out of him, there's also two moments where his dad is like the first one is you can blame me for that one. I've raised him myself, and I don't know whether to give him a hug or a kick in the ass. With
Right.
all due respect, sir, I think we both know which one of those he needs. And then there's another one where Chuck is talking shit about Raleigh and Mako drifting, but then his dad just says, "Oi, show some respect." He actually piloted a Jaeger all by himself. I've known one other pilot that was able to do that. And then Chuck's just like, like he was put in his place. So that
Right.
was
It's good that his dad's there to kind of ring him in a bit too. And his dad doesn't really look that much older than him is the thing too. He must have had him like very young, I guess. But
yeah,
yeah. So like I said, I like that aspect there where like his dad's there to kind of ring him in, like when he's getting out of line. His dad looks like he could kick his ass though.
he
I'll just
probably
say that.
should have.
Probably should have.
So
Yeah,
Chuck
broke me arm.
Chuck is not like a horrible character because in the end, he does pull his head out of his ass and he works with Idris Elba to finish the job. So he sort of wins my favor, but thankfully he doesn't get overly obnoxiously over the top douchebag.
Right.
He almost does a couple times, but whenever you think he's getting close, he either gets talked down to or he gets his ass kicked. So
Raleigh. He's just I always remember like just the way he says his name, he just sounds like an asshole.
So yeah, the cast is great. There's a great number of actors that are here. The dialogue's well written. The chemistry is great. The camaraderie is very infectious and very fun to watch. Overall, great characters and great camaraderie.
All right, so I'll get the next pro right here. So, like this kind of goes into the first pro, is like the plot of it. So, I'm gonna say like the concept slash lore slash world building within this movie, I think
I don't
is
have this, but I'll just probably second everything he
right,
said.
right. So, like I'm just kind of putting kind of like mixed into one, but like I said, the concept, the plot of it was very interesting. There is an interesting kind of bit of lore. I mean, some of the expanded material, like the graphic novels, and that have kind of built upon it a little bit. But just kind of the way the world evolves in a post monster world, it's definitely different for like what the MonsterVerse was doing. But you know, there's still kind of some like weird connection with the precursors and the humans and all that, and just kind of the ideas of drifting and like humans drifting with kaiju's and all that other kind of crazy shenanigans that's going on right there. And like all the visuals, like in just kind of how everything kind of pops off each other and all that too. So like I said, I thought the world building, the kind of the lore and like the concept of it was pretty cool with what they were doing. The fact you can kind of go back through somebody's memories and what does that mean to be kind of linked to somebody who like when in their last moments together and like the effect that kind of has on somebody. I like I said, I like that. I like how unique this world feels. Like it's like you go to Hong Kong and it's just this neon fueled, like neon lit up like crazy place and all that too. And you have like all the different technology and all the other stuff in the backgrounds and that. So and like everyone's kind of coming together and all that. So I mean, like I said, I like the concept lore and world building and the stuff they kind of have within the first movie here. So I mean, I don't know what else to really say, but I just kind of liked it.
Hang on a second. My fucking laptop's doing something here. Oh, here we go.
Whoa, don't show that.
Okay, so my next pro is the music.
Oh,
So the music here was done by a man named Ramin Djawadi, I think is how you say his name.
I do not know how
He,
to pronounce his name, but his score is great in here. He also did the first Iron Man, and that's a pretty. Why
yeah,
they never brought that theme back is beyond me.
he's done a lot of like not really strange, but like a lot of alternative stuff.
I think he
Um,
did Game of Thrones too.
he did do Game of Thrones, and he is doing the music for House of the Dragon. But he did the music for Clash of the Titans, A Wrinkle in Time, Iron Man, The Eternals,
Hmm.
Warcraft, and Pacific Rim. But he also did other TV shows like Westworld, Jack Ryan, and Prison Break. That's a good show.
I never watched it.
The first season, at least. I think was pretty good. But obviously, he is most well known for doing Game of Thrones. But his music is fucking awesome. Once again, um, it feels very original, and it feels very iconic and recognizable in its own way. It carves its own path and makes its own name for itself. Like the main theme for Pacific Rim, at least for me, is the music that goes dun na 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 na
Dun, 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 dun.
na. Yeah, I love that fucking
I
theme.
actually remember having that as like my alarm once. I kind of like
I had
customized.
it at one point too. Yeah, it's fucking cool.
Oh, it's like a great way to start the day.
Right? Yeah. Um, I don't have a whole lot to say about it, but there are a couple moments where the music like almost sounds a little bit Godzilla-esque, namely when Otachi is swimming his way or her way at no, yeah, her way towards um Hong Kong in order to hunt down Newton. Like when she's like going through the water at shore, the
Mhm.
music sounds just a slight touch Godzilla-esque. But then it still becomes its own thing. But you can still feel and hear the influence of Godzilla on the music. So that's great. Yeah, overall it's kick-ass. It's emotional when it needs to be. It's a
Right,
little
right.
suspenseful. It's magical and tense and action-packed. It's a very varied score, and I haven't heard a lot of this guy's music, but I think it's pretty safe to say this is probably my favorite of his work.
Yeah, like I said, I agree with you. The score is another one of my pros. As soon as I heard that first theme to start the movie, I just get like really into it, like amped up, pumped, ready to go. You know, I showed this to one of my friends, and she had never seen the movie before, and she's like, she thought it was really amazing. It's like, wow, that was so fucking good. It's like as soon as the music like sounds like kind of like Iron Man's theme, like, oh, it's the same composer. It's like, oh, duh. But yeah, like his music in this is really, really good. Definitely stands out, and it's one of those like things that like I one of the things I like the most about the movie, as soon as that music kicks in, I just got like really hyped and amped up, ready to get into this thing and get into hype mode. So, but yeah, pretty much everything you said about the score I think is really, really cool. But my next pro, I'm going to jump in ahead of you right here. The action sequences, the action in this movie is absolutely spectacular from start to finish. Granted, the Hong Kong battle is kind of the peak of the film, because we get to go what, like 10-15 minutes or something, like where it's just a pure action within like the Hong Kong setup and all
Yeah,
that with the
about that.
different Jaegers and all that. And then I feel like kind of after that, like the stuff underwater just felt kind of like a step down because the Hong Kong stuff was so. Yeah, I'll get to that when I get to cons and nitpicks. But the battle in Hong Kong was what I paid money to see, because like I mean we got a little bit of taste of action in the ocean earlier on with Knife Head, and that was cool and all because got the sense of scale and everything. But when we got to like the battle in Hong Kong and then Gypsy Danger, pretty much just like solos both monsters on its own, which is kind of crazy to think about because you had like Crimson Typhoon and Cherno Alpha were completely useless in this movie. They just sucked. But yeah, so like Gypsy comes in there, the fight with Leatherback, I really love. Then Otachi, then they head into space. Then all of a sudden they completely forget that they had a sword this whole time. And then they like fall from space. Like I said, it's the neon lit city. Like everything just looks cool. Like it brings the ship as like a baseball bat, and then they just like hit him,
Bonk.
whack. Then they use the fight the tail. Like, I thought it was just the coolest thing. I was like a little kid again watching this on the big screen for the first time. Like, yes, yes, more, more, more. Give me all the craziness. I'm like, this is so cool. Because like
Yeah,
I've been wanting this for so long. It just felt more impactful because we hadn't had any like monster movies, anything really like this before in the States. I feel like on this
yeah,
sense of scale,
nope.
because like we just get like this is an original IP. We never had really a. I mean, King Kong '05 has creature, but it's nothing like this, like giant monsters to this scale, not based on anything. Like it, like I said, it's
Could argue that maybe a kind of close comparison was the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers movie from '95.
right, but that's also based kind of on Super Sentai in a way with the original Power
True,
Ranger
yeah,
stuff.
but
So But
that
that's
in a
kind of the
sense that it's
closest.
giant robots versus giant monsters.
Right. You know, you're kind of right in that regards to Power Rangers. But like I said, something like not really based on anything. I mean, there's influence from it, but it's not specifically using footage from Japanese stuff and incorporating their
True.
stuff. But
Yeah, you're right.
yeah, but like on terms of the scale and budget and effects and all that, like nothing like this had really ever
Nah.
happened in the States. And it was awesome then. It's still awesome now. Like I said, right
Mhm.
before I didn't get the time to really fully rewatch the movie, but I've seen it so many times that like I know everything that happens because I just really love this movie. But I did rewatch the fight scenes again, and I'm like, oh, they're just so good. The Hong Kong stuff is just peak. Um, Granted, the fight scenes are always kind of raining, which some people have criticisms for, but I think with the neon lighting in Hong Kong, it really kind of works. So something that Godzilla versus Kong also did. You know, it's kind of weird because like we went through like the start of the like this new phase, and then like when we got to GVK, which is like the culmination of all these different monster movies in a way, the neon lights both fights in Hong Kong, if you will. So, but like both distinctly very different. But like I said, this is just like a big Power Rangers movie, if you will, like you were kind of saying. In the fight scene, I thought it was pretty sweet. Although they did kind of forget like why they didn't utilize the sword earlier is kind of questionable because it seemed to be very effective. But hey, you know what? Who fucking cares? Like comes a certain point where I'm like, I gotta stop. I don't care about nitpicking. I'm just being entertained. So what? Right?
Right. Yeah. So coming off what Sean was mentioning, pro number 5 for me, man, is this movie very colorful. And in contrast, you watch this and then you watch Godzilla 2014, it makes that movie look even more drab and dreary in
Right.
comparison.
But
This
there's kind of pros and
movie,
cons to each element too. Like this one feels more otherworldly. That one like kind of really puts you like feels realistic in this really grounded, tense environment. You know, it's more
sure,
suspenseful.
yeah, but this is kind of the style that I'm more like. I
Right. I get
monster
you.
movies that are very colorful.
Mm-hmm.
And man, is this movie very pleasant to look at. There's tons and tons of neon lights all over the film. And this does not have any 2014 too damn dark to see Jack Diddley shit problem.
You can see everything
You
crystal
can
clear.
see everything. And thankfully,
We toy Sid see every. I can't do the spin around this chair, but um, yeah.
there's lots of neon blues, greens, pinks, and yellows. I think those are the most common.
I'm
I did not
even the
see this.
kaiju like bleed neon.
Yeah, they literally bleed neon blue, and it's very fun and pleasant to look at.
Can I
Um,
interest you in some kaiju bone powder? Male potency up.
I don't need problems with. I don't need a solution.
I don't know, just
Whatever.
like who was the one who had the guts to like, yeah, let's do this.
Who knows? Anyway, once
Probably an
again,
episode of
not much to
Jackass or
say,
something.
but this movie is very pleasant to look at. If you're just a pure visual um viewer of film, this movie is very pleasant to look at. There's lots of good, nice colors. It's very visually appealing, and it's a lot of fun to watch.
Yep, that was like one of my other pros is the look of the film slash the VFX. Like the effects in this movie, there's a few instances where it definitely like very CGI heavy. I mean, you know, it's all CGI, and there's times where it looks not fully realistic, but I mean, for the most part, they are really good. I mean, pretty much robot stuff. I feel like we've kind of perfected. It's kind of skin where the issues with computers kind of like come into play, and it's kind of harder to replicate. But I mean, the effects in this film do look terrific and still hold up tremendously well, like over like a decade later. It's just, and even then, like, I mean, even if the effects aren't 100% perfect in some ways, it's still like really awesome stuff. I mean, as long as it looks really cool, right?
Yep. Um, I have that as a pro too, but I'll get to that in a little bit. Pro number 6. Yeah. 6 is the kaiju themselves.
That's one of my pros
I'm
as well.
not really gonna like talk about any specific kaiju in this movie because there really isn't any main threat. It's just like the entire species
Right.
themselves are the threat. But
I think
the
Leatherback might have been my favorite.
leatherback is my favorite too. A
Right.
giant reptilian silverback gorilla. I'm
Yep.
sold.
I think that was
But
Del Toro's favorite as well.
all the kaiju in this movie, they have very distinct and memorable designs. And while there's some that do like have elements that feel like big homages to previous like Otachi really reminds me of Rodan. if Rodan had a tail. Leatherback reminds me of King Kong if he was reptilian. Who is Raiju at the very end? The swimming one, or
Honestly, like I said, the monsters at the very end, they don't really get much time, and it's all underwater, and that's, like I said, it's a little, I mean, you can still see it, but it's still kind of dark. It just, the final battle feels like a step back from what we just saw in Hong Kong in a way, which we'll get you in terms of the cons and picks. But
the one that has
Latern's the big one.
I know Slattern's the big one, but the long skin, the one that gets sliced in half.
I think that's what were the names again? Raichu? No, that's a Pokemon.
I can't remember. That is
exactly because
the problem that I have is that they all look kind of interchangeable, and their names especially are interchangeable. The only one that's really distinct is Leatherback and Knifehead for obvious reasons. But the one that gets sliced in half reminds me of a Graboid from Tremors because of the protective head armor. But still, they all have really good design. There's a big variety. Like some just look like straight up mutated dinosaurs. Some look like Cthulhu Lovecraftian monstrosities. Some look like giant insectoid monsters, like the one that Pentecost kills saving Mako. Looks like Ebera or what's the crab from Space Amoeba?
Camoebus? I don't know.
No, that's the turtle.
Camoebus is a turtle. Shoot, I don't remember.
Let me Ganime. Ganime. Or yeah, like one of the Toho lobster kaiju.
Ganymedes and then Camoebus and Gazora. I have them right there.
Yep, there you go. Yeah, it looks like one of those two on steroids. Yeah, they're all very distinctive, very unique and original, but they still do feel like loving tributes to the kaiju genre's past. Again, there's a slight problem in that they don't really feel, they do feel distinct, but all the kaiju we see in the film, a lot of them aren't on screen for very long, and they just feel very simple. They're just giant mindless beasts, but they're still cool, and they're fun to watch tear shit apart, and they're fun to watch themselves be torn apart by giant robots. So you want to talk about them before I move on to my next pro?
Okay, so like I said, the Kaiju was another one of my pros, and as well as the Jaegers, which I'm sure is your next pro anyways.
Yeah, it is. So pro number 7 is...
But anyways, I would say one thing with Kaiju really quick. Like I said, I think they're pretty cool. I think, like you said, kind of one of the issues is like, because they're like a grown army from the precursors, if you will, the alien race that builds them. Some of them don't really stand out as much, and they aren't like a central focus, if you will. There's kind of, like you said, it's just like a hive mind, if you will. There's just so many of them that not all of them get their chance to really kind of shine in. That I feel like they don't fully have as much personality as some of the other like monsters we've seen. Like for instance, in like the monsters.
No, they're just giant weapons.
They're just giant weapons, if you will, which kind of like prevents them from really standing out. Like I think as creatures, and that could be considered a bit of a con, but like I said, they're just here for fights, right? We're just here to watch these kaiju fight things, and there's some unique looking designs. Like I said, Otachi and Leatherback and Knifehead look really cool. There was that one at the very beginning. They'll have kind of their like I said, everything's bathed in neon throughout this entire movie. Like with the monsters, they kind of glow. Their kaiju blood, if you will, glows blue. So there's some cool stuff in that regards with their designs and some of their abilities as well. Like one of them spits like an acid, and then you see like Gypsy Danger like freeze its tongue or its tail or something, and just like yank it out or whatever. I don't know. There's some cool stuff in there. And Leatherback has this EMP little device that he utilizes to stop things. So there's some cool stuff in that regards. I feel like the main category 5 kaiju felt kind of underwhelming, especially compared to like Leatherback and Otachi, what we saw that they were capable of. I think too, because it's just like when you get to the final part of it, it's like, oh, category 5, this thing must be unstoppable. But you don't really feel that. I will give one thing. I knew I'm mentioning the sequel again, but the Mega Kaiju felt like a way bigger threat than anything in this thing. And you really felt the stakes in that final fight. And that's the one compliment I will give that movie, is that final fight is really cool. But this one, it's just like when you get to category 5, like, oh shit, category 5, this thing must be, oh, it's kind of easy. But We'll get to that when we
Yeah,
get to the content.
we'll talk about that
But
later.
yeah, so like the kaiju, they're pretty cool, right? I mean, they don't have as much personality as some of the things like you said in the MonsterVerse or whatever, or other like Toho Japanese films, and because they're just basically weapons, not really their own
They
motivation or
also
anything.
feel kind of underpowered, like weapons or ability
Mhm.
wise. They're just giant animals, essentially. They just feel kind of boring that way, but they are still cool. So
Right.
it's kind of a minor, very minor nitpick.
And then, like I said, the next pro, this is kind of my last pro, unless I have you mentioned something else, because I feel like I've covered pretty much everything. The last pro for me are the Jaegers, of course. Gypsy Danger, still my go-to favorite. I mean, I'm
Awesome.
wearing awesome. Strike Eureka has some cool stuff too. Crimson Typhoon and Cherno Alpha do absolutely nothing in this movie. Like legitimately nothing. Like they use there's a scene where they're showcasing them playing basketball. I'm like, wow, that basketball skills are really gonna help you fight a giant monster. Um,
Right.
and it gets its ass kicked in instant, like Cherno Alpha instantly, and then like Gypsy literally takes out all of them like at once. Like, why aren't you like double teaming like these monsters at once, or wait until they kind of get like a little bit closer, so you're not like out of your element in the water, if you will. But like I said, Gypsy is really cool, has a lot of cool abilities like the gun, and then of course the sword and like freeze cannon. Just like also like I said, it felt like a Power Rangers thing come together. It's like
Mhm.
we need power, we need the power sword. Ching. Whoosh. Oh yeah, and they also have that's right. They had like the like GLaDOS or whatever as the voice or something like that of the Jaegers. Altitude thing, blah blah blah. So
Sword deployment.
we're out
Plasma
of options,
cannon
Mako.
engaged.
Yep.
Yeah, my next pro is the Jaegers. I do have one major nitpick regarding the Jaegers, but the Jaegers overall do feel. Stop bothering me. What the hell do you want? Are you eating shit now? Or is it applesauce? Gross.
I'm gonna get. I was gonna quote Punisher Warzone.
I'm gonna get my
My
apple.
applesauce. You know, Nick, one
Anyway,
day we got to talk about Punisher Warzone one day. That movie's hilarious.
if I ever get hardcore back in the superhero
Or
movies,
just do a one off,
very
just to talk, or just do a one off because that movie is absolutely hilarious.
anyway, so
Kidneys and applesauce are a delicacy in Sweden. Did you know that? I'm sorry,
the
not thinking
Jaegers
that's stupid.
are a brilliant concept, both visually and science-wise, but also just as giant robots. You know, they're fucking cool.
Yeah,
I'm always a
giant.
sucker for giant robots. The idea of having two pilots for a giant robot, I actually think makes a lot of sense because it literally is a 60 to 70 meter tall giant robot. So I'd imagine something that size would be a bit too much for just one human brain to control. So having two does make a lot of sense. Um, but their designs are cool. They do feel obviously like big homages to Gundam and like Mazinger Z or Getter Robo. But I do also like how this kind of goes into the action scenes, but I do like how they move. They don't move like the Transformers do in the Transformers films. They're not swift, agile, and fluid. They're clunky, experimental, and prototypey. Sure, there have been some streamlined designs that have been made for them as the Kaiju War has gone on, but for the most part, they all feel very just bulky and heavy, for lack of a better term. And I like that. It gives a lot of weight and power to the action scenes. And it does enhance the realism in a good way that's not boring.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Again, I have one major problem. I'm just going to call it a con, but we'll talk about that later for
Yeah.
the Jaegers. But still, whereas the kaiju do feel like giant weapons, which is fine in the context of this film, the Jaegers too are also giant weapons, and it's fun to watch these two types of giant weapons just go at it. It's awesome, and yes, does feel a little bit reminiscent of Power Rangers, just a tad.
But hey, I love Power Rangers. I even have my own Power Ranger suit.
Oh, for the record, too, Gypsy Danger is my favorite in the film, too. Gypsy Danger especially feels like a big homage to Mazinger Z. So I'm going to go through that real quick. So, well, this is for all the Jaegers, but for Gypsy Danger specifically, the pilots are held inside its head, and the head needs to be connected to the body in order for it to be fully activated. Just like with Mazinger Z, when Koji Kabuto says "Pilder on," the hovercraft Pilder implants itself into Mazinger Z's head, fully activating the robot. Gypsy Danger has elbow rockets to enhance his punches, which is very reminiscent of the famous rocket punch attack from Mazinger Z. It's a little bit different here, but similar to Great Mazinger, Gypsy Danger has these swords that come out of his arm. Great Mazinger has swords that he pulls out of his leg. And Gypsy Danger fires a red fiery beam from his chest, which is similar to the attack that Mazinger Z has called the, I kid you not, it is literally called this, the breast fire. Look it up. It makes sense in the context of Mazinger Z, but it's literally called that.
I've never watched Mazinger Z, so I'm just like kind of nodding. Okay. Was Mazinger?
Yeah, I
what
love
was Mazinger Z again? Was it just an original robot thing, or is it something like in a long IP?
No, look it up. That's a whole kettle of fish.
All right, I'm gonna look it up now.
See, I love how much Gypsy Danger is an homage to Mazinger Z. And when I saw this movie, I had just started becoming a Mazinger Z fan. So I really appreciated that seemingly Guillermo Del Toro was just throwing his love of Mazinger Z into Gypsy Danger. So that's awesome. My next pro number 8, is there are some funny lines throughout this movie. It's more just like witty dialogue. Go ahead.
1, don't you ever touch me. 2, don't you ever touch me again. Like the stuff like that, or where
He
is my
created a narrow bitch from garbage and drifted with a kaiju.
told you.
Just watching Newton and what's the other one name?
Gottlieb.
Yeah, watching these two just argue and bicker like an old married couple is fucking hysterical.
No, they're generally like funny. Like you have Charlie Day is pretty good. I mean, the only other place I've seen that like Gottlieb actor and was in Dark Knight Rises. So he's the one who just gets sent out onto the ice and plummets through. He's like one of Bane's like right hand henchmen.
Oh, okay.
But Charlie Day is a very funny guy. I mean, I know you don't watch Always Sunny in Philadelphia, but it's a pretty funny show. And Charlie has so many great moments. He's just such.
So I created a homemade drifting machine, and I was like, "Holy jeez, you went and did it, didn't you?" I did it a little bit. Yeah. You are going to a public refuge. I tried it once. Now get the hell out of here. Good old Ron Perlman.
I love his fashion sense too. Like it's just such this weird like design. Like he's just this really bizarre eccentric character that Perlman plays in the movie. And he's great. Like I said, I just start laughing when he pops up. He's like the laughing and the cool factor. I mean,
guess who's back? You one-eyed bitch. You owe me a kaiju brain.
Or just a little bit where he, like I said, where he puked in the toilet that just happened to be there in the middle of the city.
Yeah,
like that's a funny visual gag. And like I said, little bits sprinkled in throughout that.
Yeah, none of the humor is really like side-splittingly funny, but you'll get some really good snicker moments out of this movie.
Mm-hmm.
Pro number 9 is
the practical effects
scenes are pretty entertaining. Yeah, I was kind of surprised that I wouldn't say that there is not a lot of action, but a lot of the action scenes are kind of short and sweet. Not like Gamera Guardian of the Universe, thankfully, but it is more akin to like Ultraman. There's a lot of bombastic shit that goes into these action scenes, so you don't really notice that they are kind of short. They're they're quick, fast, brutal, and get to the point.
Right, because there's a
And
bit
they're
of a
still
gap
entertaining.
between scenes. Because like you have the opening action bit, monster fight. You don't get another fight for a really long time. You get little stuff on the news, but not until the Hong Kong battle, which comes much later on in the film.
Yeah, I would agree that the Hong Kong battle is the highlight of the movie. It's so badass, so entertaining, so bombastic, hard hitting, and brutal, but it's so fucking cool.
Right,
Uh,
it's like how do you top that at that point? You know what I mean? It feels like we still
yeah,
have more stuff to
unfortunately, you kind of don't. At least not in this
come.
movie. More on that later. Um, but yeah. Oh, one thing I love too is that talking about the monsters and the robots with their size, because they're so big and because they're so clunky, they do move slowly. And the action scenes are a bit like slower choreographed, but thankfully they really lean into how big and heavy these things are. So whenever Gypsy Danger punches Leatherback or another kaiju, you feel and see the impact of that giant metal fist caving in a monster's skull. It's fucking cool. Um, yeah, action scenes are great. They're well choreographed, very believably shot. And speaking of which, the final pro, the special effects are fucking amazing. There is a little bit of practical effects done here, like a lot of the sets. Well, there's like heavy hybridization. Like there's some real stuff being built, but there is a lot of heavy use of green screen. The pilot suits are all practical and they look great. They look like suits of power armor, which I love. And there is some practical like monster effects, like the animatronic kaiju sea lice and the goopy splattery intestine shit that
Right, and like those Jaeger sets were like practical, like the interior of it, because Del Toro wanted them to kind of have more weight to them when the actors are like hooked up to these big, huge things. So
yep
I admire the fact that they try to film as much practically and build stuff to really have people get something to kind of bounce off of. That's kind of why it looks like as good as it does. I feel.
yep, I agree. And thankfully, because this movie had a 180 to 200 million budget, the CGI, I would say 99.9% of the time looks top notch. Thankfully, it's very colorful and it's very well lit, but a lot of it's very well animated, very well detailed.
I feel like the
Really,
rain helps it a bit too.
yeah, the rain helps everything look a lot more real and a lot more believable.
Because you look at the
And
daytime stuff, it doesn't look quite as good with the Jaeger fights as it does with the rain. It's kind of weird. Like it looks like you had that quick couple seconds of Striker Eureka taking down a monster. Looks good, but it doesn't look as it looks. It definitely looks more like an effect than like some of the
yeah,
stuff.
yeah, I'll agree with you there. I think it's because it's so brightly lit.
Yeah,
It just kind of sticks out a little
and
bit more.
kaiju fights are tough sometimes to do, like without the actual suits in that, like in the daytime to make them look as real. Depending on like your model that you're working with. I mean, Skull Island, I think, had done it the best in terms of like what looks real, like the Skull Crawler and Kong. Like those look so photoreal, like you really feel like it's there. You know what I mean?
Yep, I agree. So yeah, overall the special effects are great. The CGI is top notch, very consistent. There might be a couple frames here or there where the effects look like effects, but I still wouldn't say they're bad. They just look a little noticeable. But overall, yeah, the effects in this movie are top notch. The practical stuff that we have is very appreciated, and the digital stuff is very well done and very well animated. This is a very good, and this is in the thick of the dark PG-13 era of Hollywood. This is a very good blending of digital and practical effects, in my opinion. So yeah, effects are top notch. Highly recommended. So I have two nitpicks and I have one major con.
Okay, so let me get into some of my stuff, like, because I have nitpicks slash cons, or where I'm just kind of combining together. Um, so I guess a little nitpick, and this is kind of one I just like. I feel like some things, such as like drift compatibility, aren't really explained all that well in this film. Like I said, I get the concept of drifting with the Jaeger, but like, what really determines drift compatibility? Because like, all of a sudden it's like, oh, we're drift compatible. Like this way, it's drift compatible, but we're not drift compatible. Like, is it like you're kind of in sync fighting wise? But then like, because there's like this big whole process where Raleigh has to like go through all these recruits, and then he sinks, like him and Mako are kind of like fighting like beat for beat, if you will. And then you have Stacker and Chuck, who's just like, oh, we'll drift fine. You have all these issues. We'll be okay. Like I just feel like some of that just kind of like wasn't really explained much. And also another con, I guess I could say, like a little bit nitpick, is Cherno Alpha and Crimson Typhoon don't get like anything to do. I know we kind of already mentioned that already. Like they just feel kind of like fodder, if you will. I also like my biggest issue. There's kind of two things left. In my terms of my con slash nitpicks, and I'm pretty much done, so I might as well just wrap them up. The third act, the final underwater battle, is pretty underwhelming. Uh,
Yeah, I'll
it,
agree. That's my one con. Is the
especially
final battle
after,
is very underwhelming.
right,
Yes,
because
I
it's like we
agree.
just had this big, huge, epic thing in the city, and it was so awesome, and like it was like nothing I had seen before. And then you go from that to like fighting underwater. It's dark. I mean, it's slower because they're fighting underwater, and it's kind of underwhelming. It just
Cool
feels like, and then
concept.
it's a cool concept, but I mean, the best underwater fights, you have to go look to the Aquaman movie. Somehow that
Yeah.
movie made the action sequences underwater really cool. But shooting underwater fight scenes, unless it's like animated or something, which I mean, this technically is because it's animated in a computer, but like underwater sequences, like there's just a slowness to it all that just makes it less like impactful. Not to say you can't have action on the water, because there's been some good stuff before, but it's a lot harder to do like good action in water than it is on land, I'd say. And it's pretty evident here because, like I said, like they're at the bottom of the ocean. I mean, you can still see things okay, but it's not as pristine or like clear cut as some of the other stuff. And the Category 5 Kaiju, granted, there is a sacrifice involved with Striker Eureka to kind of weaken it, if you will. It just isn't as exciting.
Intimidating.
Yeah, it's not as intimidating. I think the part where they go through the portal between dimensions is really cool. Like it's visually like breathtaking. And then he kind of blows it up, but it just felt like kind of underwhelming. Like especially after what I just saw in the city with all that amazing stuff, it just felt like, I feel like that should have just been the final fight in the movie. But I understand they need to get underwater, but that's that. And then my last con, if you will, I think the pacing at times is what kind of holds this movie back, because you know how we mentioned early on how like there's a large gap between fight scenes, and you do really feel the length between like the opening fight scene and the battle in Hong Kong. And granted, it's setting up a lot of character stuff for like payoffs, and then the actors are good, but some of that definitely does drag a bit much at times. Sometimes I'll be watching and be like, yeah, I kind of want to just get past some of this stuff and get to the fight scene, if you will, a little bit quicker. Whereas with some movies, like I don't mind like kind of waiting for them, but this one I'm just kind of like sometimes they're just like when it gets to some of that stuff, I'm like for instance when Chuck is just like saying dumb stuff with Raleigh and all that. Like I mean, I just don't really need that. It just kind of like drags the movie down. Now, granted, I heard there's a longer version of this movie, was more like in depth with the characters, but Del Toro's like, look, there's gonna be a lot of kids watching this movie. Like it's not some big artsy thing or whatever. Kind of reading the Wikipedia where he's like, I had to trim some of it down to make it closer to 2 hours because, like I said, there's going to be kids watching this thing, and they kind of want to get to the stuff a little bit quicker, but you still want to kind of have enough of those character building moments in there as well. But you also kind of want to get to the point why people are here. You know what I'm saying? So there are times where the pacing definitely like drags in some instances, if you will. But I mean, for the most part, I mean, when you get to the good stuff, it is really, really quite good. And still, like, there's still some interesting stuff that happens in between. But yeah, like I said, some of the Jaegers don't get as much to do. Some of the Kaiju don't get as much to do. I wish they could have elaborated a little bit more with the drift compatibility angle. The underwater battle is kind of underwhelming, especially after the big fight we had in Hong Kong, which is incredible. And there's a little bit of pacing issues. But other than that, I mean, I think the movie is fantastic.
To talk about the pacing real quick, I would almost put that as a nitpick because I do agree that there is a big chunk between the action scenes in the first two acts, but it doesn't bother me quite as much because the movie is still entertaining to watch between the action scenes. Like the characters are enjoyable, the lore is interesting, kind of funny at times. It is enjoyable to watch, but I will agree that if you're just in the mood to watch something more actiony, this movie can slow down at quite a bit at a few points.
Yeah, that's kind of what I meant. So sometimes it's like it could have just fast forward just a smidge.
My first nitpick. Well, Idris Elba does a great job playing Pentecost. He himself, I think, is kind of dense and stubborn. Mainly for in the dense area because um I think at this point in the war it would be a good idea to start learning how the kaiju think and learn and adapt. But he's just kind of more hyper focused on just starting up the Jaegers to try to kill them and close the breach. He's not looking really for alternative ways to defeat the kaiju. He's just like, go, 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 shoot first and ask questions later. Only at the 11th hour does he realize, okay, Newton's actually onto something. So maybe we should actually look into what he's talking about. But the stubborn aspect, this is the thing that really bothers me about him. Grounding Raleigh and Mako for the Hong Kong fight until the 11th hour.
Mm-hmm.
These two are drift compatible. Just let them do their thing. And I
I
understand.
understand, like you said, because they had the issue. Like that's kind of another thing too. Like, why do they hook him up to the Jaeger right away? Why not have like some machine first where you're not controlling a deadly weapon to link up first? You know what I mean? As like a test trial run. You,
Not that specifically, but because Raleigh is experienced with drifting, he's a good coach to get Mako through her shit. But him just ostensibly just saying no, 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 you're not doing nothing. No, you're not doing this. No, you're not doing that. Until the 11th hour, when two Jaegers have been massacred and the main weapon has been disabled. Oh, okay, now let's throw out Gypsy Danger and let's now let these two do their shit and slaughter kaiju. It just is a bit dense and stubborn for my too much for my taste. You kind of just want to thump him upside the head and say, "Dude, pull your head out of your ass." I do get that he has a lot of hesitation
because
because he
Mako's like his
doesn't.
adoptive daughter, so
Yeah, he doesn't want anything to happen to her. But if she's okay with it, and she is an adult, and she is willing to put her life on the line in order to defeat monsters, just let her do it.
mm-hmm.
Um, so that's my first nitpick. It doesn't kill Pentecost as a character by any means. Idris Elba still does a great job, and he does give that really good Doomsday speech. I'll agree with you there. But the first two acts, he's just a tiny bit frustrating. Nitpick number two. This is almost a con. While the Jaegers are cool, they're kind of underpowered in my opinion. Not just for Cherno and Crimson getting massacred within minutes by these two other kaiju, but they don't really they don't feel as powerful as they could be. Like in my opinion, easily Gypsy Danger is the strongest Jaeger we see in this movie. He has the most weapons, the chest cannon, the plasma cannon, the elbow rockets, and the two arm blades. What does Cherno Alpha have? Extendable fists. That's it. There was concept art that showed that there was flamethrowers in the shoulders. Why wasn't that used in the movie? That would have been cool. Um, Crimson Typhoon has 3 arms and 3 saw blades. He's the first one to get killed. Striker Eureka has missile launchers and arm blades. That's it. And this is my main problem with the Jaegers. Man, are they so easily destroyed. Like, even at the end, this goes into my final battle problem. The Jaegers just get their asses kicked left and right. Um, like Cherno Alpha gets dissolved and squished by Leatherback. Crimson Typhoon gets its head torn off.
I'm surprised they
Striking,
don't like surround like all three of them surround at once. You think that'd be easier than just sending one at a time.
yeah, right. Um, and even Gypsy Danger. Okay, I'll just get into my one con is I will agree. Yes, the final battle is very underwhelming. It looks cool because it's literally at the bottom of the Mariana Trench. And when the thermonuclear bomb on Striker Eureka's back goes off, it's a really cool effect that there's such a big, giant mushroom cloud. It literally pushes back all the water under the ocean momentarily, and then it has to come. So it's like a dry pocket at the bottom of the ocean.
That pressure.
And then the water comes crashing back down on Gypsy Danger. It's a cool visual. Um, and I do get that because they literally are at the bottom of the Mariana Trench, they are moving slower. It's a lot darker. So it looks cool in concept, but Gypsy and Striker just get their asses kicked, especially Gypsy. After Gypsy had just proven it's the strongest Jaeger in Hong Kong, for then all of a sudden it gets its arm torn off, it gets its leg partially torn out, and all of its weapons are unusable at this point, except for that one sword. It's kind of lame and frustrating. It feels like fake tension. Just destroy the destroy all their weapons and cripple them just to create fake tension. It's just kind of lame. And Slattern, the category 5 kaiju, is very underwhelming as a big final boss monster. He doesn't look much larger than the other two kaiju, and those are category 4s.
Yep.
So, what makes Slattern so special?
Yeah,
Nothing.
Leatherback did more damage than and Otachi did more damage than
Yeah, I'd
Slayer
have
did.
to agree. But that's my main problem is that Gypsy and Striker just get their asses kicked so easily at the very end. Um, Now, seeing Gypsy Danger blow up in the Precursor's realm is a cool visual, and it's a cool, like, little big bang of an ending. But yeah, I'll agree. The third act is a little underwhelming, specifically the final battle. It's just a little lame, I hate to say. So, with all that being said, Sean, final thoughts on Pacific Rim?
I mean, Pacific Rim's an all-time great.
Excuse me.
I mean, Pacific Rim is an all-time great monster movie. It's one of my favorites. It's the film that jump-started the new golden era of kaiju films. I mean, it's an exceptional movie. I mean, from start to finish, there's so many great things about it. I feel like it's one where it's pleased like fans and critics alike. You don't really hear too much like divisiveness surrounding Pacific Rim, though. It just feels like a normal. You know how like with a lot of Godzilla movies, there's fans who like this type, but then they hate. Then you'll have like another group of fans who equally hate the film that some really love, and then like vice versa with another thing, depending on the tone of that. With Pacific Rim, the first movie, it kind of is a universally loved giant monster movie. You don't really hear too much flack about this one. Now, the second one, you definitely do, but the first one, you really don't. I mean, Del Toro's passion just shines through. It's a stunning looking film. The color palette looks all great. The actors are all giving it their all. Has a triumphant feeling to it. Great score, great action, cool looking monsters and giant robots. I mean, it's the movie we needed back in 2013. It was such a great return to form for giant monster movies. Now, granted, I was bummed it wasn't as successful as it was. I mean, I'm not like I don't I'm not an investor in the movie or anything like that, but it just kind of felt like, oh man, like this is something that I really love, but it doesn't seem to be catching on with everybody. Now, granted, Pacific Rim has grown more of a following over the years, and it's like a lot more beloved now, I feel like, than it was then. Um, but it was just like I said, I wanted it to do kind of better at the time. Like I was disappointed in everyone. Like you're all seeing grown-ups too when you could be watching some really good, fine cinema right here. What's wrong with all of you? Man, grown-ups 2 sucked. Fuck that movie. And fuck the first movie too. It's awful. But
Agreed.
yeah, like Pacific Rim, it's just a fantastic movie. Lots of love there. I was really happy with this film when I saw it. Love the score, love kind of everything about it. So what is it, Nick, that like do you think kept people from really seeing it? Is it because it's an original IP? I wouldn't say necessarily because of giant monsters, because we've seen giant monster movies do well in the past. So I'm wondering like what held people back from like seeing this movie with despite all its awesomeness, you know?
Probably it was an original IP, but also I think because um we were still in the thick of the Kaiju drought, and
A lot of people don't really, because a lot of people like during that drought, because there's like a lot of new viewers who don't really know much about these types of films too. I think there definitely had to be that IP that kind of like hooks people a little bit onto it. That's why the 2014 Godzilla domestically was still the most successful, because of the 10-year drought, and it's like, oh, we're getting a new take on Godzilla. There's still that built-in hype around it, and that movie did exceptionally well at the box office. But yeah, so like I said, Pacific Rim, fantastic movie. I can't say enough great things about it. Um, I like I said, if you just watch Pacific Rim 1 and just kind of leave it there, you're generally pretty good with this series. You don't really need to watch the second movie too much. Pacific Rim the Black is also quite good. I will say the Netflix series is pretty solid as well. It takes a bit of a different approach with it. And I think I think Kirk Hansen does appear in the series too, like the same actor.
oh, that'd be cool.
Yeah, he has like a small like little part in it, but it's mostly set like I think during that 10-year period between the first movie and or like the start of the first movie and the end or whatever. I can't remember exactly. It's a different like, there's some Jaeger this kind of like dead zone, if you will, of like this kind of like I'm trying to think. This wasteland, if you will. It's kind of set in this wasteland type area where there's some kaiju that seemingly roam around and stuff. And there's some conspiracies and a lot of back and forth stuff. And it kind of has like some new stuff with the mythos or whatever. But I do think you might enjoy Pacific Rim the Black. I mean, I watched it like once, both seasons, but I quite liked it. But anyways, going back to the first movie, I mean, I have the Gypsy Danger hat. I mean, I have the movie. I think it's great. Can't say enough good things about it. Phenomenal film.
All right, so 10 years later, after Pacific Rim debuted,
God, 10
this,
years. I feel old.
this movie does hold up very strongly. Um, Again, it's got great effects. It's probably my third favorite, maybe second favorite Guillermo Del Toro movie. I really appreciate that he is such a big kaiju and mecha fan. It's very entertaining, very well made, very original, and very refreshing, even 10 years later. Um, but the $1 million question, so it was kind of like a 1-2 punch combo that really invigorated the kaiju genre with this and then Godzilla 2014. Now, which movie do I prefer? I can't answer that question
In
because
some ways, I kind of like this one more, but in other ways, I do like think 2014 does things better too. In some
I
ways,
think
I think they're
Pacific Rim and 2014 are equally as good
yeah, it's tough
from a
to say
creative.
because like there's times I mean 2014 has Godzilla, but also has that slow pace build up and all that. But Pacific Rim is more fun and more bombastic, and the action scenes are certainly more entertaining. But the big moments, like Godzilla with the Kiss of Death, are great. But like they're two tonally so different in terms of what they're doing. I feel like GVK is more in line with what Pacific Rim is than anything. Like that's the closest in terms of tone to the first. I mean, they're both bathed in neon, like every frame, if you will, and stuff. Although this one had more weight to the action, I think, than GVK did. But you know what? Hey, it is what it is, I suppose.
Yeah. So with that being said, I'm gonna give Pacific Rim a very strong, solid 8 out of 10. This is a very good movie. It's very entertaining. It does have a couple things that hold it back, but overall, this is just a fun flick. If you want to sit back and just watch a giant monster movie, Pacific Rim is one of the most fun and entertaining that recent years have to offer. Great.
Oh yeah, I guess my rating. So 9 out of 10. I can't give it the full 10 out of 10. As much as I do love this movie, but I can't. I feel like 8's a little bit too low for this thing because I did see this movie 4 times in theaters, and it's a movie I've watched continuously over the years. I mean, I even if I haven't watched it like evenly into this video, I just know it so well. If you know, so like I clearly had a lot to say, so clearly it did leave an impact on me. I
Yeah,
have a
me
fine
too.
appreciation for this film. I mean, I have the Gypsy Danger hat, and I watched this movie so many times. You know, I was a really big fan of this movie. Was my mom like became like one of her favorite movies. Genuinely, was the first Pacific Rim, if you will. So I mean, it's a very beloved like movie within my family. I mean, everyone's seen it. It's like likes it. You got a likable cast. It's funny. I mean, the monster stuff is so cool. It's great. It's a fantastic film that just holds up remarkably well all these years later. So.
Alrighty, post your comments down below and let me know what you think. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and share this video with your friends. Sean, you got anything to plug?
I have some more recent videos on the channel that people could check out, if you will. I think I'm gonna probably do a live stream tonight as well, but I need to give my voice a little bit of a break because we've been talking for like 2 hours right now. So I might do one at 10, just kind of covering like the stuff that happened for Godzilla Day, if you will, and yeah. So we'll see what happens then. I gotta do some sort of video for Godzilla Day. I'd feel wrong if I didn't, so I might just do a quick stream.
All right, and happy birthday to the big G, of course.
Oh yes, happy 69.
And look forward to more Kaiju content coming out this month. And as always, go out, and if you see a giant monster looming towards you out of the Great Pacific Ocean, run. And I will see you guys in the next video.